Okay. Mike.
Thank you, Minister. Welcome, and your colleagues. I'd like to begin by asking some questions about Myanmar and the Rakhine State. Could you give us your update and assessment of the current conditions and the position as regards the refugees who are in Bangladesh and elsewhere, and whether the conditions are currently suitable for them to go back to their homes?
Thank you, Mike, for that. You'll appreciate that addressing the situation in Rakhine State remains one of the government's most pressing foreign policy priorities. The conditions are deeply concerning. I spoke with the two foreign ministers for both Bangladesh and Burma on the 15th of November, at the time when it looked as though returns were going to be imminent, and made the case that, as we have repeatedly made, that this needs to be not just voluntary but also dignified and safe and secure. And clearly there was a view from the international community, both UN agencies and our own people on the ground, that was not the case at that time. As you'll know, Mike, there was an election, a general election in Bangladesh on the 30th of December, and in part the thought process was that this move towards trying to get some returns was driven partly by that political imperative. Where we were very pleased, clearly, was that, along with others in the international community, we were able to make a case that was listened to by both sides. Now, I've spoken the course of the beginning of this year with the new High Commissioner for Bangladesh here in London, expressed our ongoing concerns that any returns will need to be voluntary. Clearly, the international community would like to see returns, but not at some breakneck speed, but with those conditions being satisfactory to do so, and of course, as I say, with voluntariness being at the heart. Clearly, we haven't reached that stage yet.
You said you've spoken with the Bangladeshi authorities. Have you made recent representations to the Burmese Myanmar authorities?
I haven't personally. I mean, as you may know, the Foreign Secretary was there in September. It's in my assuming we could ever get out of this place with all the Brexit votes that may be upon us in the months to come. Certainly, my intention is to as a first priority of another visit to Asia Burma will be one of the countries I wish to visit, and obviously I hope at that stage to be able to speak to some counterparts to discuss this and indeed other bilateral issues.
And what have we done internationally to put pressure on those authorities to enable the Rohingya to go home, for example, within the Security Council?
Well, I think it's worth pointing out in relation to the Security Council that we have had to overcome some strong opposition from certain other council members at the permanent Security Council members to secure the 9 votes that were needed for the fact-finding mission to brief the Security Council in October. As you'll gather, Mike, I obviously spoke on the floor of the House in the debate that you were attending on the 21st of December. This is work that continues apace, but we are, I think, realistic about the likelihood of getting a Security Council resolution, given what I've just said about the fact-finding mission. But we, as you know, have encouraged China to continue to play a leadership role within the international community to help to resolve the Rohingya crisis. And we've welcomed their work on the Security Council presidential statement in November 2017. So not all is entirely bleak in that regard, but clearly this is something that we are addressing very firmly.
Can I press you on the Security Council? Presidential statement is all very well,
Sure.
But what we really need is a resolution. It's been reported that the UK government had prepared a draft resolution for being adopted within the Security Council. That obviously has potential problem with China and Russia, and maybe, I don't know whether there are other countries, non-permanent members also, who would be problematic. Perhaps could you give us your assessment
Sure.
of what the position is as regards the likelihood of getting any meaningful resolution rather than a simple presidential statement?
No. I mean, the presidential statement, as I say, was a little over a year ago. So yes, obviously there are a lot of discussions that are underway. I should perhaps say that the Foreign Secretary spoke with his counterpart, Wang Li, the Foreign Minister of China, only at the weekend. I've obviously seen the printout of that conversation. And I have to say the main subject that was brought up was that in relation to Burma. So these are issues that we are discussing. I think you'll appreciate that at a slightly sensitive stage. I don't want to go into any great specific detail here, but it is very much a priority. I guess the one thing that is worth always pointing out in relation to these issues is, as you'll appreciate, we'll probably discuss somewhat in a range of other areas during the course of this afternoon. There is a very strong sense from the Chinese about the idea of what goes on within one's territory is something that is a matter for internal affairs, and therefore there is an ongoing concern that the Chinese authorities have, not least given the strong economic and other equities they have with Burma, to formally criticise. But equally, I think there's little doubt that the Chinese authorities are aware of the deep concern, global concern about the plight of the Rohingya and the sense in which the Burmese authorities need to rise to the challenge of dealing with the whole range of issues in the Annan report, and in particular the issue of citizenship going forward.
But the Annan report has not been implemented, and we've still got 700,000, I don't know if that's the correct figure now, Rohingya outside of the traditional homes, in a pretty bad place. And isn't it time we somehow or other, even if we can't get Security Council agreement because of permanent members, and you've mentioned China and Russia, blocking that, isn't it time we thought of other ways to put pressure on the authorities
Sure. I think you could be assured.
Can I specifically ask about sanctions? There were sanctions in the past. Sanctions were lifted because the so-called democratic change was taking place. Are we now in a position where it's time to think again, and whether those sanctions are internationally agreed or whether they are done by democratic countries that are concerned about the situation and believe that some pressure needs to be exerted? And would those sanctions have any chance of changing the behaviour of the authorities in Myanmar?
As I was going to say, I think you can be assured we will keep as much pressure on as we can, and we'll look in as many ways as we can to try and resolve the situation. I think within the EU, the UK has been instrumental in delivering very targeted sanctions on 14 named individuals responsible for human rights violations, very specific violations, in the aftermath of the 25th of August last 2017.
Are they all in the military, all 14?
They're all within the either military or police, so yes, all are part of the law enforcement regime, and therefore we're discussing further listings. There are ongoing listings and ongoing evidence is being brought together, which we will discuss with EU partners. Sorry, just one slight mistake I made. I think I read the readout at the weekend. The conversation between Wang Li and the Foreign Secretary took place last Thursday, I understand.